Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for...
It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy's Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hopefully your week's off to a good start. Big show today. A lot going on. Kevin Potts joins me here in about 20 minutes to talk about Anthony Richardson being benched for Joe Flacco. Tony East joins me at 11 o'clock, where we're going to talk Indiana Pacers and their rough start to the season. The Yankees have life in the World Series after winning last night. Crazy fans ripping the ball out of Mookie Betts' glove. Just like I said, a lot of things going on, but we have to start, of course, with the news that broke yesterday that Joe Flacco is now going, or he's going to start on Sunday. Joe Flacco is going to start Sunday Night Football against the Minnesota Vikings, and I'm assuming that this is going to be the case going forward. I would be surprised if we saw Anthony Richardson start another game unless Joe Flacco gets hurt. And honestly, I'd be surprised if we saw Anthony Richardson start another game in a Colts uniform, barring injury from Joe Flacco or whatever quarterback the Colts bring in next year if they don't trade away Anthony Richardson before that. Looking at the history, I think it's pretty clear that Anthony Richardson's time here in Indianapolis is done. Bryce Young got benched this year. The only reason he started against the Broncos was because Andy Dalton got hurt and, that car accident. The Steelers replaced Kenny Pickett a couple years ago. They benched him for Mitch Trubisky in 2023. And then I can't remember if Trubisky got hurt or if they pulled him. But after that, instead of the Steelers going back to Kenny Pickett, they went to Mason Rudolph. Okay, so those are two of the more recent first-round picks at quarterback that started early in their careers, were benched, and were not given their jobs back. Okay, just kind of waiting on that Bryce Young trade to happen, and, Kenny Pickett was traded in the offseason. So, because of that, I fully expect for the Colts to trade Anthony Richardson at some point this year during the offseason. Maybe it's early next year. We'll see. Teams just don't go back to quarterbacks that they bench. Maybe I'm missing someone. I'm assuming that I'm not, because if there was a quarterback that got benched and then was given his starting job back, it would have been cited in every pro Anthony Richardson argument yesterday. And look, if you listen to the show, then you already know my feelings on this. I'm pretty annoyed at the fact that the Colts decided to bench Anthony Richardson. Okay, they knew what they were signing up for when they drafted Anthony Richardson from the top down. Jim Irsay said, quote, "For Anthony Richardson, it's going to be tough. We know that, but he has to play better." I mean, there's no question Gardner Minshew could come out and obviously play better early on just being a veteran, but we have to get Anthony on the field. Jim Irsay knew what he was signing his franchise up for when they drafted Anthony Richardson, a raw, unproven prospect who'd only started 13 games in college during his time at Florida. Shane Steichen was asked about Anthony Richardson when they drafted him. This is right after they selected him 4th overall draft night. Here's what Shane Steichen said about the development of Anthony Richardson.
I think the development of players comes with more experience, right? 13 starts. I think when you play more, that's how you develop. You know what I mean? So with him playing and his experience as a player and getting more reps, right? Practice reps, game reps. I think that's how you develop.
Shane Steichen, on the night Anthony Richardson was drafted, talking about how you develop young players. Okay? Reps. You got to give the guy reps, right? And Chris Ballard's the guy who ultimately pulled the trigger. He's got a similar quote talking about how it's going to take time to develop the guy. Okay? And plus, Anthony, Chris Ballard's the guy who drafted him. He knew what he was signing up for. And if he didn't, then he undoubtedly deserves to be fired, which I'm going to get into here at some point. The basis of my argument, the basis of why I'm annoyed and frustrated by this decision is because of how early they're giving up on Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson has started 10 games in his career. He's started and finished 7 of them. That's it. He's thrown 217 passes in his NFL career. That is simply not a big enough sample size. Okay. I'm sure you saw all the side-by-sides of Josh Allen and Anthony Richardson early in their careers. Okay. And sure, it's looked bad so far. It's looked terrible. It's looked awful. Okay. As we all know. right? And so yesterday I'm sitting around and I'm thinking about this, and it's kind of driving me crazy. And I'm taking notes, writing down all my thoughts. And then the night comes around. I'm watching the World Series. I'm watching, the Dallas Mavericks beat the Timberwolves, and then I'm watching the Warriors beat the Nuggets, and I'm, starting to relax a little bit, reading an awesome book. And then, I get on Twitter like an idiot because Twitter never calms me down. It just riles me up. I think that's the whole point of the app. And I stumble across this video of Brian Flores at his press conference, or I believe this was yesterday, talking about Anthony Richardson. And it's interesting. Here's Brian Flores, Vikings defensive coordinator, talking about the former starting quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts.
Explosive athlete, big time arm. I mean, he's got a throw in the Houston game earlier that probably one of the best throws I've seen. Look, they're in every game. I mean, they're 4-4. They could easily, won a few more games. So it's right now. It's it's not just Anthony Richardson. They got good backs. They got good O-line. They probably got one of the best backs in the league. They got good receivers. I think Anthony he's a young player, still trying to find his way to a degree, but still makes a lot of plays. I mean, I know there's been a lot of talk about the play where he came out, but did you watch the play? Guy throws a 300-pounder off him. He runs around. I thought it was an incredible play. I mean, I got tired watching him, but I think he's a very, very talented young player. He's a dangerous player. On any snap, he could break a couple tackles and go the distance. He's fast. He's got a huge arm. When you talk about QB mobility and off-script plays, I mean, that's what he does and keep his team in a game. Even when not every throw is, perfect for him. He still has that deep, that explosive playability, which, you have those, you have 2 or 3 of those, and you're in a game.
Brian Flores, Vikings defensive coordinator, right there, talking about Anthony Richardson. And I heard, Brian Flores talk about Richardson there in just such a positive light. And then all the frustrating feelings just came rushing back because he's right. Like, he's kept the Colts in every game that they have played. And in addition to that, like, I felt like he was getting better. I guess the Colts don't agree with that assessment, but there's just so much untapped potential there. And 7 games of a sample size just isn't enough. And you compare him to other guys like Will Levis, right, who's started 19 games in his career. And the Titans appear, I think that they are, going to move off of him. And, like, that's a fair assessment, right? Because Will Levis has played over twice as many games, 19 starts, and, he's probably started and finished, I believe, 17 games in his career. Like, that's a full season's worth. The Carolina Panthers decided to move off of Bryce Young after seeing him start and finish 17 games. Like, that is a full season's worth. Like, that is the reality of it. Like, there just wasn't enough time given, right? Like, if Anthony Richardson looked like this 17 starts into his career and the Colts wanted to move off, I would applaud the decision, right? They're just giving him up. They're just giving up on him too early. And because of that, I'm assuming that this is Jim Irsay's doing. If you think fans are impatient, then you should meet NFL owners, okay? They are incredibly impatient, and at the end of the day, I just don't think that Jim Irsay wanted to put this offensive product out on the field, led by the former number 4 overall pick, to potentially get embarrassed on Sunday Night Football. I think this call is coming straight from the top. Okay, Jim Irsay signed up, was ready to be patient, and then was like, you know what? Isn't fun being patient. Okay, and so the Colts are done with him. They're going to go to Joe Flacco, who's been good this year. Okay, 7 touchdowns, 1 interception, completing 66% of his passes with the yards per attempt of 6.6 on the year. He's very average. That is what Joe Flacco is. Okay, he's an extremely average quarterback. He raises the floor of the Colts team. Okay, he's better than Anthony Richardson is right now. but there's no future whatsoever. He's going to be 40 in January. There's not much left in the tank. And ultimately, it doesn't make any sort of sense whatsoever for the Colts to sacrifice playing a quarterback who could potentially be their long-term solution if he develops like they thought he was going to, for a 39-year-old quarterback who's going to get you to like 9-8 or 10-7, and then probably lose in the first round of the playoffs to the Bills, Ravens, or Chiefs, if you even make the playoffs. Okay, I think one of the annoying parts of this conversation, and just listening to different people talk about it and different people tweet about it, is there's just this assumption that the Colts are a playoff team. And that's just not true. It's like, oh, they have Joe Flacco now. This is a playoff team. Well, guess what? Bad defenses and average quarterbacks usually don't win a lot of games. Okay, that's why they lost to the Jacksonville Jaguars earlier in the year. Okay, this is not a playoff team. The roster around Joe Flacco is not playoff worthy. Okay, you know, the clip from Kirk Herbstreit in the preseason has been floating around Twitter where he talked about this being a playoff roster around previously Anthony Richardson, now Joe Flacco. This is not a playoff roster, and Joe Flacco doesn't make it a playoff roster. Okay, the Colts have been running the same guys out there for the last 5 years. Last year with Gardner Minshew, the Indianapolis Colts went 9-8, and they missed the playoffs. 2022 with Matt Ryan, they go 4-12-1. They missed the playoffs. 2021, Carson Wentz, they go 9-8. They missed the playoffs. 2020 with Phillip Rivers, they go 11-5. They lose in the first round of the playoffs. 2019, they go 7-9 with Jacoby Brissett. They didn't make the playoffs. 2018 was the last time the Colts made the playoffs and won a playoff game. Andrew Luck was the starting quarterback of the Colts when that happened. For the past 5 years, it has basically been the same roster. They've only made the playoffs twice, and they've only won one single playoff game. And that one single playoff win came when they had an uber-talented quarterback. That's it. Since then, it has been a nonstop rotation of older journeyman quarterbacks. None of them fixed the issue. Why are we assuming that Joe Flacco's going to? This Joe Flacco move does nothing for the Colts. All that it does is restart the cycle of journeyman quarterbacks coming to Indianapolis and then going around 500. That is all that this move does. And if I remember correctly, no one enjoyed 2021 or 2022 or last year. No one enjoyed it. It's not fun sitting down watching a 500 football team. And that's what this Colts team is with Joe Flacco playing quarterback. Okay, with Anthony Richardson, guess what this team was? A 500 football team. They're 4-4. They're 4-4, and they're 5-5 in the 10 games that Anthony Richardson has started, and they've been in every single game that they have played. Okay, this Colts team didn't get any better, and they didn't get any worse. The only thing that this move of playing Joe Flacco as the starting quarterback does, the only thing that it does is ensures that you are once again going to be in quarterback purgatory, right? The revolving door of quarterbacks is going to start again, right? The Colts will probably sign Sam Darnold or Jameis Winston for next season. And then after that, it'll probably be like, I don't know, maybe they'll bring in Zach Wilson, right? Who knows what they're going to do, right? And that's kind of the point. No one knows. There is clearly, with this move of going to Joe Flacco, there is no plan in place for the future of this Colts team. Okay? And 2019 and 2020 and 2021 and 2022 was an image of a team with no future plan. Okay? And it was a lot of 500 football, right? Because there are some good players on this Colts roster, but outside of Jonathan Taylor, there's not a great one, though. This team is incredibly average, and Joe Flacco does nothing to raise the ceiling of this football team. So congrats. You're going to go 9-8. Maybe you get to 10-7. You're probably going to lose on Sunday night, and that'll be it. When we come back here in about 4 minutes, Kevin Potts, writer of the Kevin Potts NFL and NFL Draft Breakdown Substack, he's going to join the show. and we're going to continue to talk about the benching of young quarterback Anthony Richardson.
Often imitated, never duplicated. It's the real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Tickets, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? It's the real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hopefully your week is off to a good start. Joining me now, Kevin Potts, writer of the Kevin Potts NFL and NFL Draft Breakdown Substack. Kevin, what's going on, man?
Yeah, good. Coming up one of our best weekends probably in the NFL this year. Trade deadline's heating up. It's hard time to be complaining about anything.
Yeah, are the Jets going to trade anybody away after they lose on Thursday?
You know, I still think Randall Cobb could come in and maybe fix this whole situation. just keep adding some friends. What's the worst that could happen? What, you're going to lose the Patriots again?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, to be fair, the Knicks are in the NBA. They're doing everything off the power of friendship. All those guys from Nova, they're doing okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the worst strategy. Maybe the quarterback's the problem. The dude building the friendship team is the issue.
Maybe. But I want to talk Joe Flacco replacing Anthony Richardson. What was your reaction when the news broke?
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of a lot that goes into this. My first reaction was, what are they doing? I have come on this show multiple times and talked about how the super raw quarterback with 10 starts needs to play and get better. And I think if it was just the benching off of his play on the field, it'd be a massive mistake. He hasn't been good. I don't think there's any way to sugarcoat that. But he's not always been helped out by his receivers, particularly last week. Play calling's not always been the best. But I don't think he's played bad enough to strictly get benched. And I don't think that's kind of the situation we're in. I've kind of walked back a little bit from how dumb I thought the decision was, because we do have some off-field stuff that kind of ties into it. I'm assuming you've talked about him tapping out of the play over the course of the week. It's not something I thought was a big deal. If he just lied and said I got the wind knocked out of me by the ball, we're probably not having this conversation. But he said he got tired and tapped out. I don't really care, but I am not an NFL player. I've never been in an NFL locker room, so I'm not going to presume how much that impacts things. And enough former players in the media and just players on his own team, Ryan Kelly, who's been obviously a veteran, been around this team, had some choice words, didn't throw him under the bus, but said we had to talk to him. This is not our standard. Enough people have brought that up that it really seems to be an issue. If he was playing well, they'd probably still play him. But with his struggles on the field, particularly with the fumbles and stuff like that, in conjunction with him tapping out, it feels like it all came to the storm where we're going to bench him for the week against the Vikings, let the veteran go handle Brian Flores and his crazy defense on Sunday night. And if that is the case, and it's simply a 1 week benching to teach a young kid the lesson, I'm fine with it. Maybe it wouldn't be my choice, but I totally understand it from a locker room perspective. And I think Richardson can come out better on the other side. If this is a long-term thing and they're with Flacco for a while, it goes back to my point of I don't understand this. You need Richardson to play. And it would likely almost basically close the door on Richardson with the Colts, because the history of first-round quarterbacks getting benched and coming back to start on their own merit is pretty low. I believe it's Alex Smith and Rex Grossman are the only two since 2000 to even do it. And then we'd have to get into the conversation of where did this all go wrong between the players, the coaching staff, and the front office. But hopefully, glass half full view, it is just a 1 week slap on the wrist, and we're back next week letting him play.
Yeah, I've seen some people make the observation of the announcement was Joe Flacco's the starter against the Vikings. It's not Joe Flacco's the starter going forward. To me, it feels like you're really searching for something if you're like a Richardson supporter. And like you said, most of the time, teams don't go back to young quarterbacks after they bench them. Are you surprised at the impatience from the Colts?
Yeah, if it is truly just because of his play on the field, I would be surprised. If there's stuff we don't know going on in the locker room, even outside of the tapping out, maybe they're just not really happy about how things have gone for the past 6 months, I get it a little more. But I just don't really understand pulling him, because we knew this was the quarterback. You knew it when you drafted him. You knew it when he came into this year that this was going to be a guy who had to learn from mistakes. Chris Ballard said as much at press conferences. So to make this benching confuses me, because I feel like the coaching staff and the GM have said a lot of the right things about letting this guy learn, and if for the most part have let him do it until this moment. And then you have to raise the question of, well, maybe someone above their head is making these decisions, because it seems like a pretty big departure from your original plan.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel, joined by Kevin Potts, writer of the Kevin Potts NFL and NFL Draft Breakdowns on Substack. Yeah, I feel like this is a Jim Irsay thing, even though he too had a comment after Richardson was drafted of, we're going to have to give this guy time. Like all three of the big dogs, Steichen, Ballard, and Irsay, have all made some sort of comment shortly after Richardson got drafted of, we've got to give this guy time to develop. My thing is, like, as impatient as fans are, owners are less patient. And so I feel like this is a Jim Irsay thing, with him just kind of coming down. And part of my issue with it is I just don't think the Colts are that much better with Joe Flacco. What is the ceiling for the Colts, and what's the floor with Joe Flacco, assuming he's the guy the rest of the way?
Yeah, I don't think the ceiling gets much higher. Maybe it's another win or two and you get to the wild card. But I don't think it makes them that much better. Like you said, they have a lot of issues outside the quarterback position. And I think the floor is the same. I know everyone loves Flacco. The elite jokes are some of my favorite amongst me and my friends as well. But the reality is he's not a very good quarterback anymore. If you take out that one game against Jacksonville, whose secondary is one of the worst in football, he didn't play super well in the other two. He also struggles in very similar ways to Richardson does, not to the extent that Richardson does, but it doesn't really change this team that much outside of maybe you just have some more stability in your third down passing game. And I don't think that's worth it to now have the question, who is your starting quarterback in 2025? So I don't get the cost benefit analysis of going to the older quarterback. I don't think it raises the ceiling enough.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up that question of who's their starting quarterback in 2025. If I had to bet money right now, I would bet Sam Darnold. Who would you kind of expect for the Colts to go get, assuming that they're done with Richardson?
That was my first thought, was Sam Darnold, and then you draft a day 3 quarterback that is more of a Gardner Minshew type like play style, because that worked out in the previous year. But Justin Fields is probably also going to be a guy out there. But again, that seems like you're going back to the Richardson type of, well, Darnold's the best case of a guy we've seen go out there and play competent football with a good offensive coordinator, that it makes the most sense. But even then, that's probably your best veteran stopgap you've had in the past 5-10 years. But you're still probably a 10-win team that's losing to the Bills in the wild card divisional round with Sam Darnold at the helm.
I completely agree. Joined by Kevin Potts, writer of the Kevin Potts NFL and NFL Draft Breakdown Substack, talking Anthony Richardson getting benched for the 39, soon to be 40-year-old quarterback Joe Flacco. The interesting thing for me is, not even just like the future. I feel like when listening to the different talking heads and Twitter, I think there's an assumption that this Colts team is just going to make the playoffs now because they're a little bit better at quarterback. My thing is like, I just like when you look at the history of the Colts, like we've seen this before where they bring in this kind of older veteran quarterback and they still don't make the playoffs. I think that's kind of the most frustrating part for me. So like I guess my question is how can people expect for the Colts to make the playoffs when we've seen them with older journeyman quarterbacks before not make the playoffs?
I think it's because they're looking at this AFC and it is just a mess right now. You have the Colts currently in 8th at 4-4, and teams behind it like the Bengals and the Dolphins and the Jaguars have disappointed. And you see teams like the Broncos and the Los Angeles Chargers that are ahead of them and think, well, we thought this Colts team could win 10 games coming to the season. If they get competent quarterback play, maybe they can do it. But I'm looking at some of these teams above them. What unit do you trust the most? Well, probably Denver's defense. Weirdly enough, probably Los Angeles' defense. I don't know if the Colts have an offensive or defensive unit that I look at and go, oh, this can get you to the playoffs. And that extra Joe Flacco bump is enough so they're not going to get angry about their performance being wasted. And they could get in. I mean, you never know. Football's football, right? We have a lot of time to go. But I agree with you. Adding the veteran well just doesn't really move me into this Colts team making a playoff run.
Yeah, joined by Kevin Potts, writer of the Kevin Potts NFL and NFL Draft Breakdowns Substack. Do you think the Colts trade Richardson or are they going to hold on?
I think you should trade him. It's not going to work like I've seen in the middle of this season. But if you truly don't think this is going to work, there is no reason to hold on to him. Back to the 49ers, when they moved on from Trey Lance, they moved on from him, quote unquote, early. They actually got an early 4th round pick, which is better than anyone else in the class that held on to him. So I think you move him, get off of that money, get some sort of compensation back, maybe even use it to reload and take that day 3 quarterback and use those cap savings on a Sam Darnold. But if you're not going to put this player out on the field who clearly needs to play, I don't think holding him in this quarterback room and holding onto his contract makes any sense going through the offseason if you're truly done with him.
Hearing you make that statement is just so depressing of just like trade this former number 4 overall pick that everyone would admit is super talented and trade him away, sign a veteran and draft a 5th, 6th or 7th round quarterback and hope he works out. Like that just doesn't feel like a plan, right?
No, and it doesn't. And that's why, like, if it is a benching purely off of ability, why it doesn't make sense, because you're giving up on this player so early. I've been on the show multiple times, said you get at least year 3, and it's not looked good so far. I would probably said if he was starting, you still probably take like a day 3 guy to challenge him. So if you get in this situation next year, you have a young option instead of Joe Flacco getting put in. But doing it right now where you have no backup plan, you have no pivot, just is a very confusing, like you said, depressing plan. And if this is the route that ends up going, you have to have conversations about the coaching staff and the GM who made this decision, because they chose this player and it's clearly not worked early on very quickly. So what did you go wrong in the draft process? What went wrong in the development process? Because he's looked worse since his week 1 of his rookie year till now. That's not a good thing. And then clearly there's off-field stuff with this player where you don't mesh mentally, even if it's just an isolated incident. It might not be. There's just so many issues that go higher than blaming the 21-year-old quarterback, that you have to have a lot of discussions top to bottom in an organization when something like this goes wrong. And I don't like calling for jobs for people ever. But the history of head coach GM duos whiffing this bad at the top 5 isn't super favorable, and Brock Purdy's probably not walking through the door next year.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Like, you talk about drafting a day 3 guy. Not everyone's the 49ers, and not everyone stumbles into Brock Purdy. Joined by Kevin Potts, 49ers fan, writer of the Kevin Potts NFL and NFL Draft Breakdowns Substack. Part of my argument to keep Richardson has been, look, even if he's bad and you go 5-12, you're in a position to potentially draft your next guy. It doesn't seem like that's going to happen. You're the draft guy. You're the guy that we call when we need help figuring out who the Colts are going to take. This is an interesting upcoming quarterback class. Is this a class where you could potentially grab quarterback number 2 or quarterback number 3 in the class with the 18th-ish pick, assuming the Colts finish at 9-8?
I'd probably just skip the quarterback class if you finish 9-8.
Really?
I mean, we talked
Okay.
about how we don't know if the Colts can make the playoffs with the addition of Joe Flacco. Well, that means they probably need more than a rookie quarterback. And I think if you're picking in the middle rounds, and obviously if you love a guy, go get him. But from where I'm standing looking at this quarterback class, I just don't think it's very good. I would rather go and dip into a really, really good corner or interior defensive line class, continue to build this roster, and use a day 2 pick on a quarterback. Because I think the difference between these guys that are going to get pushed up in the first round, the Cam Wards and the Shadir Sanders, is not that big of a gap to some of the guys like a Carson Beck who might go in the second round at this point. And I just don't think you want to get stuck in a Kenny Pickett situation where you're stuck with another quarterback who doesn't work and the roster's not good enough around him.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, because I was just, that's kind of always. And so is it like pass on and then tank for Arch Manning? Is that the plan?
Yeah, I mean, you probably, if you take a good player in the first round, maybe you're not good enough for it. But yeah, you take a good player, accumulate draft picks so you can go make a move probably up in the draft and get into that spot of what Buffalo and Kansas City did, where their team was not a 10th worst team in football, but they went up and traded and got that quarterback so he had a soft landing spot, and just try and create a better situation for the next quarterback. Granted, who's going to be making those decisions also plays a lot into the factor of how aggressive you are, because if it's someone new coming in for coach and GM, they have probably a little bit more time and more of a runway to get into this. If you let Shane and Ballard do this again, they're probably going to have to be a little bit more aggressive given job security.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Speaking of trading up in the draft and Richardson and everything going on, who do you think would be in the market to make a trade for Richardson? I've heard a lot of Seattle, but outside of that, I haven't heard too many names. So what do you which teams would be good spots for Richardson?
Yeah, Seattle's obviously the obvious one with an older quarterback. I would like to see the Rams poke around. Obviously, you have Stafford getting up there in age. Maybe Cleveland. I have no idea what they're doing with their quarterback situation. I look at it. Vegas is another team that I think would be interested. They probably won't do it because they just drafted J.J. McCarthy, but the Vikings loved Anthony Richardson the first time around. I don't think they'd make that call at all, but I do know that they really, really liked him. I think all these teams picking that need quarterbacks in the top 10, 15, maybe the Jets do something like that, just because it's not a very good quarterback class. Would you rather send your 4th-round pick for Anthony Richardson or spend a top 10 pick on Cam Morris or Sanders, I think a lot of teams might consider the latter.
Yeah, well, I mean, Richardson's younger than those guys. And you can get him for a 4th rounder. That's an excellent point. What are the chances that, obviously, location where he ends up, obviously if Richardson gets dealt to the Jets, his chances of succeeding aren't as great as if he gets dealt to the Rams, right? What do you think are the chances that we look up in 3 years and we're like, geez, the Colts were so stupid for being impatient? Like, what are the chances we look up here in a few years and Anthony Richardson's awesome?
Probably low. I mean, but that's for most young quarterbacks. If you are a pessimist about the development of young quarterbacks, you're going to be right a lot of the time. It is a hard position to play, hard position to get better at, and the NFL clearly has a very low patience threshold for these young quarterbacks that struggle and play. I don't know if he gets moved, or even with his benching, if you ever end up being elite, because that's a really big outlier at the position. But I do still think there is a chance, if he gets traded to the right spot, that you can get to a Justin Fields to maybe even Jalen Hurts level of quarterback play if he lands in the right spot. But not to be negative, but regardless of what happens, if you guess that Richardson's probably going to fail over working out, you'd probably be right, just because that's how the odds usually shake out with these things.
Yeah, I did a study, I guess it was last year, maybe it was early this year. It's like less than half of the quarterbacks drafted in the 1st round wind up not being very good. So I think your point's right. I'm trying to think. I think I had the bust rate at like 52%, the fine starter rate at like 27%, and then the superstar quarterback at like 22% or however that maths. So yeah, I think you're exactly right, Kevin. Thanks for your time, man. As always, you were great.
Yeah, of course. It's always a pleasure.
See you, man. That is Kevin Potts, writer of the Kevin Potts NFL and NFL Draft Breakdown Substack. You can follow him on Twitter at KevinPotts06. When we come back here in about 4 minutes, the Pacers off to a bad start. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit. And then Tony East is set to join me at 11 o'clock. He is the host of Locked On Pacers, and he writes for Forbes.com covering the Pacers as well. That is at 11. So when we come back here in 4 minutes, I'm going to give you my thoughts on the Pacers' rough start to the season.
Welcome back to the real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? The real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Anthony Richardson benched for Joe Flacco. Disappointing, but I talked about that for the first 40 minutes of the show. I'll get back to it at 11:20. I want to talk a little Pacers because coming up here in 20 minutes, Tony East of Locked On Pacers. He also writes for he also covers the Pacers for Forbes.com. He's joining the show. The Pacers are 1-3. It's early. I'm not panicking quite yet, and I don't think you should either. Okay, because they're shooting horrendously bad from three. Okay, that is a big, large part as to why this team isn't winning games. Okay, like this team can clearly shoot the ball, right? That's what they did so well last year, right? And they aren't going to shoot 31% from three for the rest of the year because almost everyone on this roster can really shoot the ball. Okay, they're also running this 11-man rotation. It seems like Rick Carlisle's playing with different lineup combinations, trying to figure out who kind of fits with who, right? They've got 5 different combinations of 4 players on the floor together, averaging 15 minutes or more. Okay, that's one of the highest marks in the league. Okay, so it's early. Coach Carlisle, I think he's mixing and matching these different lineups, trying to figure out what he likes and what he doesn't like. I think that's a large part of why they're 1-3. With that being said, not panicking, but there are some things that I do not like. Okay, don't like. I'm on the verge of being tired of Tyrese Halliburton. Okay, Tyrese Halliburton's off to a bad start this year, right? Only averaging 14 points, 5 rebounds, and 5 assists, right? This is, he was an all NBA performer last year, right? He's shooting 34% from the floor, 27% from three. Now it's early, right? And that's kind of my big defense here. Like, it's early in the year. We're 4 games into it. It's not time to panic. But at the same time, other superstars in the NBA haven't really shown up like this, right? They've all just kind of shown up and been dominant from game one. Kevin Durant, LeBron James, Paulo Banchero. Okay, like the superstars of the league have just shown up and been like, yeah, we're still really good, whether it's game 1 or game 72. Okay, and as of right now, I think Halliburton's still in the clear. Okay, he played pretty well, right, against the Magic. Everyone's paying attention to the Colts right now, right? That's, the big storyline of the day, the Colts benching Anthony Richardson for Joe Flacco, right? So when it comes to Halliburton, he's fine for right now. Okay, once again, he played well against the Magic, right? 4 of 9 from three, or a rebound away from a triple-double. If he does that again tonight, no one's going to be concerned. Here's where things get interesting for Tyrese Halliburton. He's doing a lot of extra things. So there's a podcast called The Young Man and the Three. It's JJ Redick's former podcast before he took the job as the Lakers head coach. And he appears to be one of the rotating hosts of the podcast. He interviewed Barack Obama for that first show. Okay, so he's got a little extra on his plate from that angle. He just signed a big contract, not only with Puma, he also signed a big contract with the Pacers. He's got cameras following him around for the Netflix Starting 5 documentary. So he's got a lot of things around him that weren't around him last year. And if things don't get better, that's going to be the easy thing to point to as the reason why. That's the thing that's going to get blamed. He's unfocused, he's got cameras, he's doing the podcast thing, new shoe deal. I'm sure that's taking some of his time. Like, everything else for him is the same from last year. He's got the same coach, basically the same teammates, and the front office is the same. All that's changed is that he's now a star, and he's involved in way more things off the floor. Puma, podcast, Netflix documentary. Okay, if he struggles this year, that's going to be the easy thing to point to and to explain the struggles. Like, I can't stand the player podcast thing. It's annoying. Okay, the podcasts aren't good. The only one that's good is Jeff Teague's, and it's just a bunch of dudes telling stories from when they were in the league. It's great content. Okay, outside of that, they're dumb and they're pointless. like, it's frustrating. Anyway, so like that's kind of my bone to pick with Tyrese Halliburton. Feels like he's not super focused, and that could be part of why he started so slow this year. Then again, it's been 4 games. If he scores 30 tonight and the Pacers beat the Celtics, nobody's going to care. That's the reality of it. The other complaint that I have is Benedict Mathurin needs more minutes. That dude's instant offense. Okay? Like, former number 6 overall pick. He can struggle on defense at times. And I guess Rick Carlisle doesn't like how he rebounds. I mean, it just feels like a really nitpicky thing. Like, I get it. You want your guys on the floor to rebound, but I got to be honest. I don't really care about the lack of rebounding. He's a shooting guard. Leave the rebounding to Jarris Walker, Obi Toppin, Miles Turner, and Pascal Siakam. Your forwards and your centers. Like, let those guys go rebound. Okay, part of why the Pacers have struggled this year is because the offense hasn't been as good as it was last year. And you know who makes the offense better? Benedict Mathurin. Okay, he is just a really good offensive player. Okay, the Pacers need more shot creation. They need more one-on-one, late shot clock. We need a guy who can go hit a shot. Benedict Mathurin is that guy to a T. There isn't a better one-on-one scorer on this Pacers roster than Benedict Mathurin. I like Pascal Siakam. He can score one-on-one, okay? But it's a lot of post-up stuff with, on smaller guys. And look, if he gets a bigger defender on him, he can struggle a little bit. Okay, so Siakam, great player. So glad that he's here, but he's just not the same one-on-one scorer as Benedict Mathurin. Halliburton's awesome. Okay, I'm not going to let these last 4 games change my view of him, but his best ability isn't to get a shot for himself. It's to get everyone else shots, right? And everyone else is a role player, right? I love Andrew Nembhard. I thought what he did in the playoffs last year was special. But if there's 5 seconds left on the shot clock and someone just has to go get a bucket, I don't feel nearly as comfortable with Andrew Nembhard having the ball as I do when Benedict Mathurin has the ball. The fact that Mathurin's only playing 21 minutes a night is simply absurd. It needs to be closer to 30. Okay, I don't care about the lack of rebounding. I don't care about the lapses on defense. He wasn't drafted to rebound and play defense. He was drafted number 6 overall because he can score the basketball. Okay, he's a young player. It's only year 3. He missed, a lot of last year tearing the labrum in his shoulders. Okay, most young players struggle on the defensive end of the floor, right? And the lack of Mathurin minutes, I think, is pretty similar to the Anthony Richardson thing, right? Like the Colts have just kind of reached the point where they're like, we're not going to let him play through the struggles. We aren't going to let him play through the mistakes. You just sit down and watch Joe Flacco go play. And that's what the Pacers are kind of doing with Mathurin, right? It's like, oh, you didn't rebound very well, so you're not going to play. You're going to play 14 minutes on the road against the Magic when the Pacers really probably could have used Benedict Mathurin because they had some scoring lulls in that game, right? And so Ricardo's just like, no, you're going to sit here and you're going to watch. And look, it's Rick Carlisle. I'm not going to argue with many decisions that he makes, but it's early in the year. Guys like Benedict Mathurin and Jarris Walker should have opportunities to play through some of the mistakes that they make. Okay, the best teacher in everything is experience, right? Like for me, they could have hired me on here at Cumulus as just a producer, and I could have sat in this chair for 3 hours a day and watched Dan. Okay, and I would have learned some things, being a producer, I learned some things and at my old producing job, right? Because you can learn a lot through watching. There's no secret behind that. With that being said, you learn a lot more by actually doing the thing. Okay, like I've gotten better as a radio host because I've sat behind the microphone and I've done the thing. Okay, and so for the Colts and Anthony Richardson, like he's not going to get better sitting on that bench like he did last year, right? Watching, Gardner Minshew play quarterback. Okay, he's not going to get better watching Joe Flacco play quarterback. And it's the same thing for the Pacers. Benedict Mathurin and Jarris Walker aren't going to get better sitting and watching and only playing, Jarris Walker, I think, played 2 minutes against the Magic, and Benedict Mathurin, I think, only played like 14. Like, they aren't going to get better, with that happening. So the Pacers need to avoid making the same mistake that the Colts are currently making, and they need to let these young players play. That's the reality of it. Okay. In other news, the World Series, the New York Yankees came out, finally got the bats going. Won game 4. They avoided the sweep. Congrats to them. Could it end tonight? I don't know. Probably. It definitely could, because Freddie Freeman has now homered in 6 straight World Series games. But, good for the Yankees, I guess. We get one more night of baseball. Okay, they're starting to kind of find it with the bats. They hit 3 homers last night. Gleyber Torres hit 1. Anthony Volpe, who had a great game, running the bases well, playing hard. It was good. It was fun to watch. He had 4 RBI last night. Wells, he hit a home run late in the game. I mean, like, they're starting to kind of get rolling a little bit. Aaron Judge looks better at the plate than what he did. They talked about it a bit on the broadcast last night. He was 1 of 3. He worked a walk. That's the biggest thing, right? Like when hitters are struggling, it's just because they aren't seeing pitches well, right? Especially at, like, once you hit college and up, those guys' swings are fine. Okay, they may have, a slight detail off here and there, right? But ultimately, like, these guys they're swinging a bat all year. Okay, their swings are absolutely pristine. Right. When you see guys struggle, it's just because they're struggling to see the baseball for whatever reason. That's usually a front foot issue, right? Like, it's tough to see the baseball when your head's moving. So you want to put that front foot down, on time, which is, you'd rather get it down early as opposed to late. Because if you put it down late, you're not hitting anything. Right. So you watch Judge, like, the at bats are better. You can just tell he looks a little bit more comfortable, right? Like, he's swinging, like, he's getting there, right? He's not MVP Aaron Judge, but he's definitely a better version of what he's been through the first part of these playoffs. Okay, so he's getting there, right? Working that walk. He had a hit. That's a big deal. He had an RBI with that as well. So, like, that's a good sign for the Yankees going forward if they want to pull off a 2004 Red Sox and come back from down 3-0. I don't think that they're going to, just because the Dodgers are really good, and Mookie Betts, Ohtani, and Freeman, especially Freddie Freeman, geez, like, they're all playing really good baseball right now. And the Dodgers bullpen is incredibly tough. The Yankees, I believe they've got Garrett Cole going tonight. If that's the case, then they should win. There's no other way to really put it. If Garrett Cole is the guy on the bump, which it says that he is, according to ESPN, like, this is the game that the Yankees should win. Okay, especially since they're facing Jack Flaherty, who has an ERA over 6 in the playoffs. So the Yankees, like, they've got a little bit of life. I've still got no faith in them to win the series because the Dodgers are that good. But if they win tonight, we can actually start having a real conversation about, can the Yankees do the unthinkable and come back from down 3-0 to win not just a series, but the freaking World Series. Okay, when we come back here in about 4 minutes, Tony East of Locked On Pacers, he also covers the Pacers for Forbes.com. He is set to join me, and then at 11:20, we're back talking about Anthony Richardson and just what the Colts season is going to look like going forward. But here in about 5 minutes, Tony East joins the show to talk a little bit of Pacers.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for
It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Cold season underway. A lot of talk on the Anthony Richardson benching, but we're going to take a break from that. We're going to talk a little Pacers with our guy Tony East, host of Locked On Pacers. He also writes about the Pacers over on Forbes.com, so make sure you go and check that out as well. Tony, what's going on, man?
Happy to be here. Swing of things is officially here. Hoops every night.
That's right.
My household.
And it's you sound exhausted, by the way. Are you okay?
I'm great. Yes.
Okay. All right. I wanted to be sure. So before we talk Pacers, thoughts on Christie Sides being let go from the Fever, because we know you cover them as well.
Yeah, fascinating that it happened a month into their offseason, right? That's what kind of stood out the most is, with the exception of Dallas, really, all the other teams that made their coaching changes did it not long after they were eliminated, essentially, except for one other team that we'll get to in just a second. So that suggested to me they have, something very specific in mind that maybe they thought wasn't possible at first, or, just maybe wasn't an available path until recently. And hey, look, the very day after Sides is let go, Stephanie White is out in Connecticut, and I don't know anything for sure, but that does seem like a very logical path, regardless of where they're headed with this. The thing that would make them change is, there's a new front office who, every front office wants to hire their own coach. In fact, Christie Sides was hired by Lynn Dunn, and Lynn Dunn came in and immediately let go of Marianne Stanley as head coach when she came in, right? So it's just kind of how the cycle of sporting front offices go, even though I thought Sides did a good job, right? I said that to you a lot during the season, and they hired her at a time when they were needed to develop and set a culture, and she did that, and now they are a team that is trying to win every night, and I think Sides could have done that. But I think if they identify their own coach who aligns with that goal now, I suppose it makes sense, assuming they're able to get who they believe would be that person. But we'll see when something becomes official. I think it's kind of clear what they would like that path to be, but we'll see.
Sounds good. So moving on here to the Pacers, not a great start. They're 1-3. I'm not panicking, not yet at least. Even if they lose tonight, they're playing Boston. Why are the Pacers 1-3? Is it just because they're shooting 31% from three, or are there deeper issues than just that?
Who are these guys, right? Like, they look unrecognizable to some extent, and I will not have any prediction until 10 to 15 games in. If they're still looking rough, then yes, it's time for a conversation about their level of play. But that. In their first 6 games last year, they had a stretch where they went 1-3. In their first 17 games, it happened twice, right? Like, that's not a panic level thing. They lost 6 out of 7 before Christmas. They were still a playoff team, right? So I'm not saying that to say that they're not. That it's fine. They're playing not well, right? That's a big deal. And of course, they've played a tough schedule. They should have beat Philly, but that is a factor. The thing that just stands out more than anything beyond the record is that they don't look like the same team. The pace hasn't been there. I think they're 22nd in pace, or they were before last night's games. Perhaps someone near them moved around, but that was their thing last year. They were so fast. They're getting up shots quickly, which means their offense is generating good shots quickly, and that's a sign of good offense. And they've looked like that team the last game and a half. I would say the second half against the Sixers and the Magic game. But other than that, they haven't really looked like the same team, despite having the exact same players. That was kind of the appeal of the continuity strategy, and I think they can get back to it. Halliburton's been better recently, but the part that's been alarming is not the results; it's how they look, which is very strange.
Joined by Tony East, host of Locked On Pacers. He also covers the Pacers for Forbes.com. You can follow him on Twitter at Tony R East. So I'm gonna reach here for a second, and you can call me crazy when I'm done. Okay. So Tyrese Halliburton interviews Barack Obama for the Young Man and the Three podcast. Seems like he's going to be one of the rotating hosts on that show. He's got cameras following him around for the Netflix Starting 5 documentary. There's just a lot of stuff going on off the court. Are you worried about those being distractions at all? Do you think that plays any role as to why he struggled to start the year?
I don't know, to be clear. I mean, it's interesting. I see a lot of people who also are like, oh, the new contract, and he's not trying. He got paid last year, guys. He still played well after the contract. But I do agree that, I mean, there's a lot going on, and he had the obviously, like, it's just a very different life that he now lives compared to a year ago. And I saw Mark Monti tweet this, and I will rely on him because he's been around the NBA for forever. But just like fame can change guys on that approach. Now that said, I don't think it's switching Tyrese Halliburton. I just think he played like crap for 2.5 games, and that he'll be back on track. But it is certainly a lot of stuff, right? A lot of off-court stuff that he's doing. And I get why people would say, oh, he's doing all that and not playing as well. But like, I watch him in practice. I watch him around the team. Like, he seems like the same guy, seems the same level of driven. He had a very interesting offseason schedule because of the Olympics, but like, he just had 19, 10, and 9 like 2 days ago, and he didn't even look like he was playing that well in that game. I think we're close to a Halliburton explosion. I don't know when it'll be or who it'll be against, and then everybody will forget all about this off-court stuff. But I understand why people are making those connections, even though I personally will not.
Yeah, I joined by Tony East, host of Locked On Pacers, and he covers the Pacers for Forbes.com as well. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that's what's going on, but you just know that if these struggles continue, that's going to become a major story, right? So how long do you think he has to struggle for? Then again, like you said, he was a rebound away from a triple-double against Orlando. He could score 30 tonight, and no one cares. But if he doesn't kind of find that rhythm, because, I mean, he was one of the 15 best players in the league last year, how long do you think it kind of takes before this story goes a little more bigger than just Indy?
Yeah, they'd have to. They got Boston tonight. If they lose that, no one forget. But then they have like New Orleans, Dallas, Charlotte, Orlando at home. Like 4 games that are more winnable. Not saying they should do very, very well in that stretch, but more winnable. Like, if they go 1-3 in that stretch and they're 2-8 or whatever that would be, then yeah, people will go. I think it's just all about team success. Even if he is playing a little better, because when they were at their best last year was when he was a top 5 guy in the league and not just a top 15 or 20 guy. And so I think it'll be about team results. They need some soon because they've been in these games, but being in them doesn't matter. They haven't been able to get over the hump, and in crunch time, he has struggled, and that's been a big factor too. So it will be based on results to me, even if he does start to play better, which he appeared to be doing this week. But we'll see. They have as tough as it gets tonight.
That's exactly right, because Boston's – I mean, look, I really like the Thunder, but I'm just kind of like, I don't think anyone's going to beat Boston, especially whenever Porzingis comes back. I look, it's 4 games into the year, so I don't want to like start complaining. Okay, like Carlisle's, I feel like he's kind of mixing and matching lineups. He's got a couple different new guys, and Jarris Walker and Mathurin missing a lot of last year. And how do you fit those guys in with Siakam? And the thing I think I'm most frustrated by, though, is Benedict Mathurin hasn't played. Like, he played 14 minutes last night or against the Magic. He's only averaging like 21 minutes a game. I really like Mathurin. I think he could turn into a great player. Do you think he should be playing more?
Yeah, not as much as everybody else does in terms of more, but certainly more than 14 minutes. Now, Orlando is a horrible matchup for him specifically. If they are just going on matchups, like, they needed shooting to space out against a huge team. That's why Ben Shepherd played more. Aaron Easton shot it well, and they needed Aaron Easton's defense on Paolo Banchero, who that wasn't like a common matchup. It didn't happen. So I kind of get why that game in particular was challenging, but you have seen Mathurin's minutes decline at the Detroit game where he was awesome. And it's got to be close to 20 at least every night, just because not only is he talented, like, they're trying to figure out his role on what the next, Pacers team really is. So that little of time in games where it's tougher to figure out his role isn't enough, right? You have to figure that stuff out. And I've kind of felt like early, that they've had to tweak their rotation a little bit already, right? We saw at first that it was Siakam coming out first, and now they want to keep Siakam in there with the bench at first, and then Halliburton. It's just a little different as they try to figure out what stars are out there and all that. I put notes in after their last game where it feels like right now the rotation is just random. Yeah. I don't even mean that to be like critical. Like, I don't look up ever and I'm like, what? This lineup is stupid. What are they doing? Why is this on the floor? Like that. Yeah. That would be me being critical of the rotation. It's just when they're trying to play so many guys, I just feel like I look up, I'm like, oh, that's what they have out there right now. Like, it doesn't feel as structured, and maybe that it's only 4 games and they're just figuring stuff out, which is fine. Like, the Warriors are doing that too, but at times it feels like it's not going the way it should. especially with Mather's minutes, which just should be a little higher. So random isn't necessarily bad, but that's just kind of how it feels to me.
Joined by Tony East, host of Locked On Pacers, also writes and covers both the Fever and the Pacers as well. You can follow him on Twitter at Tony R. East. So Coach Carlisle went on the other station earlier in the week and said Mathurin wasn't playing because of some rebounding issues and some, I guess, defensive lapses here and there. My thing is, like, it's really early in the year. I think this applies to Jarris Walker as well. Like, I feel like, if you lose games early in the year, you have time to kind of make up those losses. So I feel like he should allow guys to kind of play through mistakes, especially guys like Mathurin and Walker, who could be on future versions of this Pacers team, who could kind of potentially kind of take this team to a different space if they develop. Do you kind of agree with that? Or are you kind of with Carlisle on, if you mess up, you should probably sit down for a bit?
Yeah, Mather's defense against Philly was rough. I mean, it wasn't, not only was his on-ball defense rough, which was supposed to be where he is impactful, but his team defense was terrible. Like, they just caught all around him, and he had no idea what's going on. And so the next game is the one where his minutes are drastically reduced. Right? Yeah, I mean, they gotta play to get better at it, right? Like, Jarris has played even less. He played 2 minutes against Orlando, and Eric Gordon completely cooked him at one point, and Jarris in the zone didn't look as good against Philly. So, like, I understand that they are trying to win every game, right? And we can sit and say, okay, you don't let these guys play these mistakes, and then you look up and, like, both of those last two games, they've been tied or winning in the last minute of the game, right? Like, every point was super important. So in some ways, I'm receptive to the idea that they need to be optimizing their chances to win for 48 minutes and can't afford, a couple possessions of teachings because they're trying to win games this year and they're 1-3 and the margins have been really thin. On the other hand, I, like you look at what the Pacers could be if either of those guys hit their ceiling. You're like, oh, geez, okay, that's an awesome franchise. They have to figure that out. And it's hard. It's really hard when they are conflicting with your immediate goals of winning at times. But, neither of them have been, like, so useless or bad that you can't let them try to play through and get better. So it's just it's a hard balance to strike when these games are this close. And again, I think that both of them should be a little higher on the minutes pool, but it's hard to figure out who you take it away from to make it happen. So it's just a lot of overlapping feelings and thoughts that make it really hard to find the perfect answer. They have 11 guys that should play. This is the reality of that situation.
Yeah, like you said, which is a good issue to have. I'd rather have too many good players than not enough. Speaking of Jarris Walker, he's only playing like 8 minutes a game, which isn't, like, that's not a ton of time to, like, sit down and watch a guy. But what have you kind of thought Jarris Walker's shown so far to kind of start the year?
He does look just more comfortable as a player, right? He's not so jittery and jumpy and all the stuff that made him not effective last year. He was leaping into passing lanes and just kind of like floating through plays after a game. But, like, he is engaged. He is after the team style. He's shooting well, or at least he was. Now I think he's a little below league average from three. And his passing has been really nice too. Like, that's the thing that was an eye-popping skill for someone his size. But it's just all, like, here and there is how I would describe it. It's never just like this guy comes in for his 5 minutes in and is just so forceful and physical and doing all those things I just said that you have to keep him in there for longer, right? And they had that once. I think it was the Detroit game a little bit where he ended up with the starters a little more. But even though he looks better and more technical, which is important and why they're playing him every night, it's still not just like this dominant force on either end, especially not for any sort of consistency. So it's hard to play him a lot. And the defense on the ball, especially, is still not at the level that they need it to be someday and that they hope it can be. So it's hard to find the right moments to play him when other guys are, already being discussed as needing more minutes or are playing well in some cases. But I think he's looked better, which is at least an important sign of progress.
Who do you think's looked the best this year for the Pacers to start the year?
Siakam's been great. It's kind of been swept under the rug a little. I don't know why. It just feels like not enough people are talking about it because his talents haven't been so ridiculous, but his defense looks way better than last year. Like, he's moving his feet and staying in front of guys and sliding around and using his size in a way that's been really huge for them. And they need him to be that guy. And he just happened to, like, sniff a triple-double in their first game and just scored 26 in their last game. I think the last game, the Orlando game, he missed some shots in the fourth quarter, but that was the first player who had, like, a good 48-minute game where they weren't just good for part of the game. He was good the entire game against the Magic, has been really effective in all of their games so far. Everybody stunk in New York to some extent. So I think he's been awesome, and they need that to be the case if they're going to be better because, a theme of their season so far is they haven't had the best player on the floor in like a single game yet, have they? I mean, maybe you could say Matherin against Detroit, but Cade was sensational in that game, right? So they've got to find a way for their stars to be like legitimately great. And Siakam was trending towards that in Orlando, but then Paolo Banchero was the first 50-point scorer in the league this year, right? So
Yeah.
I think he's been good, really good. Siakam has, and they need that to continue, just given the way that their trajectory's been. It's almost been under discussed to me because Halliburton's struggles have overshadowed it, and people have been confused about minutes. But I think Siakam's been really, really great through these first 4 games.
Yeah, from what I've seen, which to be fair, I haven't meticulously watched every game. I think I caught the Pistons game and the Magic game, but yeah, from what I've seen, he's been really good. I thought he was really good the other night against Orlando. Paolo Banchero was just really freaking good at basketball.
Absurd
that was
how good he was.
He's so good. Joined by Tony East, host of Locked On Pacers, and he's the beat writer for the Pacers over at Forbes.com. Also covers the Fever as well. Last question for you. They play Boston tonight. That's a tough one. Do you think what are their chances to win tonight?
I mean, the Celtics right now, it's been 4 games for them, are shooting 43% from deep on 50 attempts a game. If that happens, I will tell you right now, the Pacers will lose. They will lose the game. They need to find a way to defend the 3-point line without giving up a ton of just easy layups all night, which is super obviously what every team wants to do. That's how every team wants to defend, and no one has figured it out. The Celtics have just teams up this season. They have to guard somewhat, though. Like, I get that the Pacers offense needs to click a little bit more than it has, but I think the last game and a half has been encouraging. If they can get enough stops, like I think the Celtics had 118 when the Pacers beat them in the in-season tournament game, and like 112 when the Pacers beat them the game Tyrese Halliburton got hurt and Bruce Brown was really effective. If they can hold them in the 110s, I think they can win. Their offense looks good enough. They have to get enough stops. That's really hard. The Celtics offense is unbelievable, but that's the key tonight because no one's been able to stop that team. And if the Pacers can get out and run just a little bit more than they've been able to in their first 4 games, that gives them a chance. But if Boston just gets rolling from deep and boom, boom, pass, open 3 points, they have no chance. No one has any chance when they play like that.
Yeah, and it's so funny watching Boston play. Like, they got Xavier Tillman posted up in the corner, and he's letting it go. Like, they played
the Bucks Monday night, and they played bad. Like, everybody stunk, and then like Peyton Pritchard just made 8 threes, and they won by 11. I'm like, you just beat a contender, and everybody on your team was bad. Like, it's unbelievable how talented they are.
Is Milwaukee a contender? I don't know. I've got questions.
Maybe not. They looked rough. They have looked really rough.
Okay, I'm going to ask you this and then I really will let you go. Do you think Damian Lillard and Giannis like each other? I don't think they do.
I actually think they really like each other. They're just not that greatest duo, right? Like, that team is so creaky. That's the word I was using before the season. They're just old, man. Like, all these teams that come in and give them any sort of speed, they have no answer. I think those two have admired each other for like forever. They just don't. You're right that they don't look like they like each other on the floor. That's for sure.
But I don't know. All right, dude. Thanks for your time, man. As always. Hopefully, the Pacers win tonight. They're 2-3, and then we're fine from there.
That's right. I'm sure we'll be chatting a lot this season.
That's right. Thanks, man.
Got it.
See ya. That is Tony East. Follow him on Twitter at Tony R East. Check out Locked On Pacers. I think he's also hosting the Locked On NBA show from time to time as well. So check him out there on top of things as well. Great guy. He does a great job covering the Pacers. When we come back here in about 4 minutes, Anthony Richardson benched for Joe Flacco. My thoughts on that here in about 4 minutes.
The best takes, stories, and entertainment. It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket. Hopefully you're having a nice week. Anthony Richardson isn't. He's having a rough week, getting ripped by everybody, and then he gets benched for Joe Flacco for the Sunday night game against the Minnesota Vikings. That news broke yesterday, and I'm assuming, I know there's some ideas out there that this isn't the case, but I'm assuming Joe Flacco is going to be the starter for the rest of the year. Some people don't think that's the case. I don't know. It's just not normal for teams to bench a guy and then bring them back. Okay? Colts aren't going to run Anthony Richardson out there again unless Joe Flacco gets hurt. Just looking at the history, especially the recent history, it's just not what teams do, right? Bryce Young got benched this year. The only reason he played Sunday in Denver was because Sam Darnold got hurt. When Kenny Pickett, when the Steelers were like, this guy's bad, they went to Mitch Trubisky, and then they're like, Mitch Trubisky isn't much better. Mason Rudolph, let's throw you in there. They didn't even go back to Pickett after they realized how bad Mitch Trubisky is. So, those are two of the more recent guys. Kevin Potts, who was on the show earlier, mentioned that I guess Alex Smith, the 49ers did that with him, and the at the time Redskins did that with Rex Grossman. So it's not a normal thing. Is it out of the question? I guess not. I'd just be really surprised if it happened, given the history of how teams operate with their young quarterbacks. Usually when they're benched, they don't play them. Again, with that being said, I fully expect the Colts to trade Anthony Richardson this year during the offseason or next year. Right? Teams just don't go back to quarterbacks that they bench. That's just the reality of it. So they're probably going to move off of Anthony Richardson here at some point, which is annoying. It just is. No way around it. Okay, the Colts knew what they were in for when they drafted Anthony Richardson. They knew exactly what they were signing up for. Raw potential, needs time to develop, all those things. Jim Irsay said, quote, for Anthony Richardson, it's going to be tough. We know that. But he has to play better. Or he has to play to get better, excuse me. I mean, there's no question Gardner Minshew could come out and obviously play better early on just being a veteran, but we have to get Anthony on the field. That was Jim Irsay when they drafted Anthony Richardson. Okay, Jim Irsay, the owner, and the guy I think behind this, knew what they were signing up for. And he wasn't the only one. Coach Shane Steichen knew what they were signing up for as well. Here's Shane Steichen talking about Anthony Richardson and developing him on the night that he was drafted.
I think the development of players comes with more experience, right? 13 starts. I think when you play more, that's how you develop. You know what I mean? So with him playing and his experience as a player and getting more reps, right? Practice reps, game reps. I think that's how you develop.
That was Colts head coach Shane Steichen talking about developing Anthony Richardson. And he gave those thoughts, I believe, the night that Anthony Richardson was drafted. Okay. Obviously Chris Ballard knew what they were signing up for. He's got quotes floating around out there about patience and all those things. And then, the Colts weren't patient at all. Right. And if Chris Ballard didn't know that he was going to have to be this patient when he took Anthony Richardson, then he deserves to be fired. Okay. The sample size is just too small. Anthony Richardson started 10 games in his career. He started and finished 7 of them. He's only attempted 217 passes in his career. That's nothing. That is nothing. Sure, it's looked bad. He was the worst starting quarterback in the NFL. No question about it. Okay, but the Colts are 500 in the games that he started, and they've had a chance to win every single game that they have played. Right. And a large part of that is because the good side of Anthony Richardson and his ability to generate these big explosive plays, either with his arm or with his legs. Okay. So sure, Anthony Richardson struggled a lot, but the reason why the Colts were in a lot of these games is because of Anthony Richardson. And because they're giving up on him so incredibly early, I'm assuming that this is Jim Irsay's doing. Owners are less patient than fans, and I'm assuming that Jim Irsay didn't want to potentially get embarrassed on Sunday Night Football by running out their former number 4 overall pick quarterback to watch him go 10 of 32. Okay? The sample size for Anthony Richardson is just too small. For comparison, Will Levis has thrown almost twice as many passes in 19 games, 19 starts. That is a big enough sample size for the Titans to know whether or not Will Levis is the future of their franchise. It appears that he isn't. He has played almost 3 times the amount of games that Anthony Richardson has. All right, it just feels like the Colts are giving up on Anthony Richardson too early. Bryce Young, same thing. He started he started 16 of 17 games last year for the Panthers, and he started the first 2 games this year for the Panthers. That is a big enough sample size for Carolina to be like, you know what, this guy, not very good. Let's move on. The Colts just don't have the sample size to make the proper decision around Anthony Richardson. It would not surprise me in the slightest if the Colts traded him and he became a starting caliber quarterback somewhere else. There's a ton of potential, and we have no idea how close he is to reaching it. We saw him play 4 games last year, or start 4 games last year. We've seen him start 6 games this year. That's it. Okay? And I won't be shocked in the slightest if we look up here in a few years and it's like, oh, he's really good. Who would have thought? And then the Colts' lack of patience is going to kick them in the butt, very similar to, actually, I wouldn't call it similar because the Rams won a Super Bowl, but you know what? There's people in that Rams front office like, geez, like, if we'd only waited to see what Jared Goff could become, like, our future, like, would be set, you know? But, you know, now Jared Goff's balling out in Detroit. And so, you know, the impatience on the Colts' part is just, alarming is not the right word. It's frustrating. That's really what it is. Now, like I said to open the segment, they could go back to him. It is an option. You know, the report was that Joe Flacco was going to start against the Vikings, not Joe Flacco is going to be the starter going forward, which is usually kind of the wording of that. So maybe there's something there for the people out there that are like, they're going to kill Anthony Richardson's confidence. That's just a bunch of hooey. Okay, like if this kills Anthony Richardson's confidence to a point where he doesn't play well, then he was never going to be a starting quarterback in the NFL anyway. Too fragile from that perspective, okay? So maybe this is just a wake-up call. We'll see. As of right now, though, they're going to Flacco. I'm assuming he's going to be the starter the rest of the year because that's what we've seen from NFL teams throughout the history of the league. And, you know, like, he's been good. 7 touchdowns, only 1 interception, completing 66% of his passes with the yards per attempt of 6.6. He's very average. Okay, I know that he took the Browns to the playoffs last year, but when he took over for the Browns were 7-3. Okay, he didn't have to do too much there. Okay, he played well. You know, that defense, I think, really kind of carried the load for Cleveland, given the number of interceptions that he threw. Once again, he is very, very average. He raises the floor of this Colts team. Okay, he is better than Anthony Richardson is right now. There's no doubt about that. But there's also no future with him. He'll be 40 in January. He doesn't have all that much left in the tank, and it doesn't make any sort of sense for the Colts to sacrifice playing a quarterback who could potentially be their long-term solution at the most important position in the NFL to play a 39-year-old quarterback that's going to get you to 9-8 or 7 or 10-7. Okay? And then after that, you're probably going to lose in the first round to the Bills, Ravens, or Chiefs. Like, this Colts defense isn't good, and their quarterback is average. And that's not exactly a winning combination that leads to deep playoff runs. Usually teams with bad defenses and average quarterbacks don't make the playoffs. Okay, my biggest issue with how this is being covered and how people are talking about this Colts team now that Joe Flacco is the starter is that it's just like, oh, like they're a playoff team now. And that's just not true. You know, Kirk Herbstreit, he had that clip during the Bengals game where he called this Colts roster a playoff roster. And that's just simply not true. It's not true. Because the Colts have done this before. They've taken the journeyman quarterback, inserted him in with this exact same roster, because it's been the same roster for the last 5 years, and they haven't made the playoffs last year. They bring in Gardner Minshew, journeyman quarterback. They go 9-8, and they miss the playoffs. 2022, they bring in Matt Ryan. They go 4-12-1, and they missed the playoffs. 2021, they bring in Carson Wentz. They go 9-8, and they missed the playoffs. 2020, they bring in Phillip Rivers, right? They go 11-5. Yay. And then they lose in the wild card round to the Buffalo Bills and Josh Allen. 2019, they bring in Jacoby Brissett. They go 7-9, and they didn't make the playoffs. 2018 was the last time they won a playoff game. That was Andrew Luck's last year. Okay, for the last 5 years, it's been basically the same roster with a different quarterback at each and every single stop. The only time they made the playoffs and won a playoff game was when they had an awesome quarterback in Andrew Luck. Okay, it's almost like quarterbacks really matter. And if you have an average one in the playoffs, you aren't going to win. It's that simple, especially when the rest of your roster is inferior, like the Colts is compared to the Chiefs, Ravens, and Bills. Okay, this Joe Flacco move does absolutely nothing for the Indianapolis Colts. All it does is restart the cycle of journeyman quarterbacks coming to Indianapolis and going 500. There is a bright side in this. This is probably going to get Chris Ballard fired. Okay, Chris Ballard probably isn't going to keep his job when you've been somewhere for 8 years and you don't draft the quarterback, you don't draft the guy, and you consistently go 500. And then when you do draft the guy, he gets benched after only starting and finishing 7 games. Usually, like that, you don't keep your job. 8 years of doing absolutely nothing, going 500, making the playoffs, 3 times? And that's just not enough to keep your job. Okay, there is clearly a lack of confidence in Anthony Richardson, but there should be more faith, more confidence in Anthony Richardson going forward than Chris Ballard. Because at least there's room for Anthony Richardson to grow and to get better. There's no room for that for Chris Ballard. It's been 8 years of the exact same nonsense on repeat. The only way Chris Ballard keeps his job, and to give him some credit, he's got a chance because they have a legitimate backup in Joe Flacco who could get hot. We've seen it before. And maybe they make the playoffs and maybe they get past the wild card round. That's a tall order. That's probably not going to happen. But that's what has to happen in order for him to keep his job. It better be more than just, oh, you made the playoffs. We're going to let you draft our next quarterback. Again, even though the last time you did it, the guy lasted 10 starts. So that, I guess, would be the bright side in all this. There's a decent chance that Chris Ballard, the best drafter in the National Football League, he's probably going to get fired after this. When we come back here in 4 minutes, the Pacers play tonight, the World Series. That happens again tonight. We're going to get into that. And it's going to be good. So stick around when we come back here in 4 minutes. Thoughts on the Pacers, their rough start to the season, and the World Series.
Unadulterated sports talk with unfiltered takes. It's the real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Tickets, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? It's the real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hopefully you're having a nice week. Oh, man. One more thing on Anthony Richardson here. Colts head coach Shane Steichen opened up his press conference today. He was, and obviously he, no questions needed to be asked. He was asked, or he just made a statement on Joe Flacco and the situation of the Colts quarterback room going forward. Here's Shane Steichen talking about the benching of Anthony Richardson. Shane Steichen right there talking about the benching of Anthony Richardson. So there it is. This is not a one-game thing. Anthony Richardson is going to be the backup going forward. We're only going to see him again if Joe Flacco gets hurt. And I'm not hoping this happens. So let me say that first. I just think it'd be really funny if, like, on the third play of the game, Joe Flacco got hurt, Anthony Richardson came in, and the Colts won on Sunday. I think that'd just be the funniest thing ever. It probably won't happen. Hopefully it does not happen. But there you have it. According to Shane Steichen, that was his decision, not Jim Irsay's, not Chris Ballard's. He kind of has to say that. So who really knows? But we'll see. And he kind of said it point blank there, and I don't think he's wrong. Joe Flacco does give them the best chance to win right now. Like he does. And I don't know. You're 5-5 when Richardson starts. You're 1-1 so far when Joe Flacco starts, and that's just kind of the reality of it. Like, sure, he gives you a better chance to win right now, but congrats on your 9-8 season and maybe making the playoffs, and then getting thumped by Baltimore, Buffalo, or Kansas City. Sorry, the audio there, not super great, but it was basically just Shane Steichen making it crystal clear that Joe Flacco is the starter going forward, which means he's going to be the starter for the rest of the year. So Shane Steichen also said that Anthony Richardson's going to be the backup, and he also said that the tap out had nothing to do with the decision, which makes sense, right? Like, if this decision was based off of Anthony Richardson pulling himself out of the game, then it probably would have been a 1 week, you're going to be the backup kind of thing. Teach him a lesson, all that kind of stuff. But the fact that Joe Flacco is going to be the starter going forward means that he was pulled because of his play. Shane Steichen says that they aren't giving up on him. I'll believe it when I see it. Okay, because the history of the NFL tells us that when you pull and you bench your young quarterback, it usually means that you are giving up on them. So we'll see what kind of happens going forward, but we're going to see Joe Flacco on Sunday night playing against the Vikings. I don't know if you can bet the over-under on sacks, but whatever the over-under is, I'd bet the over on the amount of times Joe Flacco gets sacked on Sunday night, because it's going to be rough. No Bernard Raymond. He's in concussion protocol, all that kind of stuff, and the Vikings blitz a ton. So that'll be interesting to watch. Speaking of watching, you should watch the Pacers tonight, and you should watch the World Series. The Pacers playing tonight. I believe that they're playing at 7:00 at home against the Boston Celtics. That game's on ESPN, so you can watch the game there. Pacers off to a 1-3 start. Not panicking quite yet. Okay, I don't think anyone should panic quite yet about this Indiana Pacers team. It's the same guys. They just got to start shooting the ball a little bit better. Only shooting 31% from three on the year, and if there's anything that this roster can do, it's score points and shoot the basketball. So I think they're going to be fine. I'm not worried about it. They're also playing, a lot of guys. It's pretty obvious that Rick Carlisle, Pacers head coach, is in the process of searching, right? He's trying to figure out, the different lineups that he likes on the floor for different situations, which is, I don't know, that's what coaches do early in the season. So, they've played 5 different combinations of 4 players on the floor together, averaging 15 minutes or more a game, which is just evidence of he's searching. He's trying to figure out what he likes and what he doesn't like. So, not worried about the Pacers. Even if they lose tonight, they're playing Boston, and Boston's the best team in the league. No way around it. Okay, they're leading the league in 3-point shooting percentage, and they're leading the league in threes taken. So, I mean, they get them up, man. Like they're just going to shoot a ton of threes, and hopefully they miss. That's kind of really what it feels like when you play Boston right now. But with that being said, with the lack of panicking that is going on in my mind about the Pacers, I do have some complaints. I'm getting tired of Tyrese Halliburton. Okay, Tyrese Halliburton struggling to start the year, to say the least. He's only averaging 14 points a game, 5 rebounds, and 5 assists. He's shooting 34% from the floor and 27% from 3. Now, look, it's early, okay, but the other superstars in the NBA didn't start slow like this. Like Kevin Durant's playing really well. LeBron's playing really well. Anthony Davis, he's playing well. You can just keep the list going. Like these guys are, like all the other superstars are playing well, except for Tyrese Halliburton. And, as of right now, he's in the clear. It's early. Like I said, it's only been 4 games. Everyone's paying attention to the Colts. Everyone's paying attention to the Joe Flacco, Anthony Richardson stuff. Okay, Halliburton played well against the Magic, right? A rebound away from a triple-double, hit 4 of 9 threes. If he does that again tonight, I don't think people are going to be concerned, but he's got a lot going on outside of basketball, right? He's helping host, a podcast called The Young Man in the 3. He interviewed Barack Obama. Cool, I guess. He's got cameras following him around for the Netflix Starting 5 documentary. He's got a whole bunch of money. He just signed a new contract with Puma. Like, if things don't get better, like that's going to be the reason why, right? Like that's what people are gonna point to. That's what's going to get blamed, because everything else for him is the same from last year, right? He's got the same coach. He's got the same teammates. Front office is the same. All that's changed is that he's now a star. He's recognizable outside of just Indianapolis, and because of that, he's involved in more off the court things. So if he struggles this year, then that's going to be the storyline. That's the thing that people are going to point to explain the struggles that he's going through. Okay, like I remember Baker Mayfield came out his rookie year and he played well, and then he was in all these progressive commercials, right? And he was just a bigger star, and he was bad the next year, and people were like, well, if you hadn't been filming commercials, then maybe you'd be better. And so, like, that is kind of the path that Halliburton's heading down. Then again, if he scores 30 tonight and the Pacers win, nobody's going to care. So there's that. My other complaint, Benedict Mathurin needs more minutes. This guy's instant offense. Okay, like, is the defense bad at times? Yes. Does he rebound like Rick Carlisle wants him to? I guess not. I got to be honest. I don't care about the lack of rebounding. The lack of defense is obviously concerning. He should be a good defender, given that he's 6'7" with like a 7-foot wingspan or whatever it is. But when it comes to rebounding, like, he's a shooting guard. Like, can we leave the rebounding to Jarris Walker and Obi Toppin and Miles Turner and Pascal Siakam? Like, can we let the small forwards, power forwards, and centers go rebound? If there's a long one from time to time, sure, go grab it. But come on now, Rick. Come on now. Like, the Pacers need more shot creation, especially like late shot clock situations. Because as Tony East mentioned earlier, he came on at 11. Like, their pace is really slowed down as compared to last year. So, like, because of that, they've got more of these late shot clock scenarios. And Benedict Mathurin's the best one-on-one scorer on this roster. Like, I like Siakam, but he's just a post-up guy, and if he has a bigger defender on him, then he can struggle a little bit. Halliburton's awesome, but he's not a one-on-one scorer, right? He's a guy who's going to find guys later in the shot clock. So I would like to see more minutes from Mathurin. The fact he only played 14 the other night against Orlando is just unacceptable, right? He should be a 25-minute-a-night guy at a minimum, just because of the offense that he provides on the floor. Okay, 21 minutes a night needs to be a little bit more. Okay, especially if Andrew Nembhard, who's gotten off to a rough start, like, if he's not going to play well, then like, you need Mathurin out there. I get that Nembhard's a better defender and all those things, but I don't care. I want guys who can score on the court. Okay, so he's a young guy as well. I wish the Pacers would let him kind of play through some of the mistakes that he makes. Same thing goes with Jarris Walker, because the best teacher is experience, right? Like, let these young guys that are struggling get out there, let them work through the mistakes. It's an 82-game season, right? If you lose game 5 against the Celtics, you got 77 games to make up that loss. So they're going to be fine. Like let these young guys get out there, let them work through some of these mistakes, because that will help the Pacers in the long run. The Yankees, they've got some life, right? They scored 11 runs last night. They hit 3 home runs. Freddie Freeman is now homered in 6 straight World Series games, which is pretty insane. So he's on a tear. Aaron Judge looks a lot better at the plate. 1 for 3 last night, worked a walk. I mean, he's getting there, right? He's not MVP Aaron Judge where he's going to hit, a whole bunch of home runs, but he looks so much better than what he did, right? Earlier, especially in the ALCS, like outside of the home run he hit against the Guardians, like he looked really bad. So he's slowly kind of getting back on track. Volpe had a day yesterday. He was awesome. He was actually fun to watch, just the way that he ran, the bases and all those things. So World Series, it's fun to watch. I'm still got a lot of faith in the Dodgers. With that being said, the Yankees have a legit chance to win tonight. Garrett Cole, best pitcher in the series, best starting pitcher in the series. Let me be a little more direct there. Garrett Cole, the best starting pitcher in the series. He's getting the ball tonight. So taking on Jack Flaherty, whose ERA is over 6 in the postseason. Like, this is a very winnable game at home for the Yankees. And if that happens, you're down 2-3 and you're heading back to LA, and who knows what could happen, right? So, the Yankees know very well that it's possible to come back from down 3-0 in Major League Baseball in the playoffs. So we'll see. I mean, I hope the Dodgers win tonight, because I can't stand the Yankees and all that good stuff. But there is there is more baseball tonight. Can't wait to watch it. That game, I believe, starts at 8:00. That's been the start time for like every game that's been played, which isn't a bad thing. So watch the Pacers for an hour. Watch them play Boston, the best team in the league, and then flip it over later and watch the Yankees and the Dodgers. Should be an absolute blast to watch. That's going to do it here on The Real Jonathan Smith Show. Hopefully you enjoyed it. The Dan Dockett Show is coming your way next. Big show today. Rick Venturi's on at 1. Armando, he's going to join the show at 1:30. So a couple of great guests lined up today for the Dan Dockett Show. He'll have thoughts on, Shane Steichen coming out saying that Joe Flacco's the starter the rest of the way and all that kind of stuff. So keep it right here. Keep it here on Indy Sports Ticket, 14:30 a.m. Download that Indy Sports Ticket app. Head over to YouTube and subscribe to the YouTube as well, Indy's Sports Ticket. Thanks again for tuning in. I'll talk to you tomorrow starting at 10 o'clock.